This podcast aims to help you break in and thrive in advertising. And we do that by interviewing people that have found success in the industry to give advice directly to your ears. In this episode, I speak with a mentor, friend, and expert in the industry. This episode is unique because the day we recorded this episode, Professor Shanita Akintonde delivered her final official lecture to her advertising class at Columbia College in Chicago. After 23 years of teaching, Professor Akintonde is heading to the next chapter of her career. I mentioned her last official lecture because everywhere she goes and everyone lucky enough to speak with her is graced with knowledge. I met Professor Akintonde at a Chicago Advertising Federation networking event months ago and at an American Marketing Association event she hosted at Columbia College. Shanita is an award-winning educator and firecracker communicator propelled by love. This professor, podcast host, author, columnist, wife, mother, and scholar draws on 30 years of experience in business, media, diversity, and leadership when engaging audiences around the globe. Whether in front of a classroom or podium, Shanita uses her expertise to transition thousands of students from the classroom to the boardroom and has helped scores of professionals achieve success in their work lives as well. She's been involved with just about every marketing, advertising, and public relation organization because she is passionate about giving back and helping aspiring advertisers. It means a lot that we recorded this episode coincidentally on her last day of official instruction. I hope you all enjoy this conversation. You are joining a community of thousands of successful alumni by connecting with Professor Akintonde. To do that, listen to this episode and visit our Instagram page at Breaking and Entering Pod, all one word. There, we have her resources that she recommends you follow to break in and thrive in advertising. Now, on with the show. This is the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast, and as usual, I'm your accomplice, Gino Schellenberger. Kick it, Mikey. All right, Professor Shanita Akintonde, welcome to the Breaking and Entering Advertising Podcast. I'm super excited to have you on today. How are you doing? Anything special go on today in your life?
Well, first, let me say I'm super excited to be here with you, Gino. And two things exciting are going on. Here in Chicago, it's like 75 to 78 degrees outside. So it's like extra warm, which makes me all bubbly and excited inside. And also today marks my last day as an official professor at Columbia College Chicago. And I'll emphasize at Columbia College Chicago because I will always be a professor, but today was my last class, so it's a bit bittersweet for me. I said my sayonara's and my goodbyes to my students and hugged, and we cried together. But yes, so today it was official. So yes.
Well, congratulations. That is amazing span there. I'm sure you've changed the lives of so many students, and now you're going to change the lives of the people listening. So it won't end there. And
nice.
I know I met you through some events, the AAF event, and the AMA event that you hosted at Columbia College. So, and the two times that I met you in person have been spectacular. And I could tell that your influence is just, it's far reaching for these students.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. So we want to talk about now, like, what did you teach for all those years and what's your game plan now?
So what I taught, and let me just preface this by saying, Gino, I was there for 23 years. The number 23 is special, especially again here in Chicago. Michael Jordan wore the number 23 for those who don't know. So 23 is like a magical number, right? In my span of time, which crosses 2 decades, I actually started teaching new products marketing. That was my very first course I taught. And I taught that for a few semesters. And then I segued into some specific advertising oriented courses like intro to advertising, consumer behavior, brands and branding, things like that. And then most recently, in the past couple of semesters, I've segued over into public relations courses as well. So I've taught introduction to public relations, PR presentation skills. So I've been more of an integrated marketer. That's been my approach. And so I've had a little bit of marketing a lot of advertising and some public relations sprinkled in.
Love it. What was your favorite? What was your favorite class?
Well, that's like asking me which one of my children are my favorite, I mean,
Oh.
I love them all, but to be honest, at the core of my heart is advertising, because that's where I started my aspirational journey, so to speak, as a college student. It was advertising was what I majored in, and that was what I planned to do solely and completely in my career. But as we know, we make plans, God laughs. So I had to abide by what the universe opened up for me and offered me as different paths to take that I didn't see as an undergraduate. But thankfully, it all led me back to this kind of conversion, as I mentioned, of all three, of marketing, advertising, and public relations.
And we'll dive into your background and how you got involved in all this. But first, I mean, to say you were just a professor, I mean, that's not even close. I mean, you're so involved. You have like 10 different like roles on LinkedIn that you're currently a part of. But what else are you involved with? And I know you have your LLC, but tell us like what you're doing with your time.
Well, I do have a podcast similar to you that I host called Marketing Insights. It's the #1 ranked podcast I found out this year from McGraw-Hill. And I share tidbits, thank you, and expert advice on all three of those tenets I just mentioned: marketing, advertising, and public relations, though it leans more heavily toward marketing. In addition, you mentioned the career day where we met, the Chicago Advertising Federation. So I'm very involved with that group here in Chicago, the Chicago chapter, American Marketing Association, and the Public Relations Society of America. So I'm very much steeped in all three of those groups. And I must tell you, I am the first African-American and youngest female to serve on the boards of all three of those organizations at the same time.
Wow. That is incredible.
Yep, I'm very proud of that.
Have you been in Chicago your whole life?
So I was born in Stuttgart, West Germany, and my parents came back to the United States when I was 2. My dad was in the military, and I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Predominantly, that's my upbringing. Went to high school and all that on the south side. And then when I attended college, I also attended Columbia, I started shifting downtown. So now I'm in the West Loop where I live, but I'm a South Side girl, born and bred, or bred, not born, for most of my
What high school?
Childhood. Morgan Park High School.
My guy went there. Io DeSumo.
No, tell him, fellow MPIer. Yes, we call ourselves MPI Mustangs. We were the Mustangs, but Morgan Park Mustangs. Yes, I'm very proud of that school. Good school.
Yeah. Io plays for the Bulls now. He went to Illinois. He's awesome. So
he's okay. Well, I mentioned Michael Jordan, so there you go.
Yeah. Amazing. And tell us about your company, Shanita Speaks.
So Shanita Speaks evolved. I'd launched a company in 2002 with a different moniker, and it basically focuses on helping young adults and women learn how to listen better, lead better, and love better themselves and those that may appear to be different. And that last piece about loving themselves and those who may appear to be different ties into not only the love that we have for products, goods, and services, because we do have love affairs with those types of things when branding and other things are done correctly, but also it speaks to diversity. And a lot of my work is tied into diversity in terms of how people, products, and goods can be better serviced by talking specifically and authentically to the audiences that use them or who purchase them. And so I spend a lot of time advising organizations, groups, and other entities on how to make that happen, and to do it in ways that make us as marketers and communicators tap into the skills that we already have at our disposal.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Where can we go from here in this conversation? There's so many different routes. What are you passionate about? Like, where do you want to begin with all the knowledge that you have? We could talk for hours, but what are you really passionate about that you want to start with?
Well, I'm passionate about the very reason why you invited me to be here on your podcast, I'm passionate about, at the end of the day, connecting with people and making all of these things that may appear to be lofty or unattainable or complicated. I like to simplify them and give people a real tangible understanding of how they themselves can move forward and follow their passions, assuming this is something they want to do. So with all the quirkiness and craziness that goes along with the field, I want people to know that if it's in their heart and they really have a passion and think this is what they want to do, this being advertising or marketing or public relations or communication, to give them the tools to help them, even in this short time we're together today.
I love it. So let's talk about how you broke in first. And then we'll get to all the advice and all the lessons that you accumulated.
How much time do we have again? Because you saying, okay, you want me to go back. You want me to go back?
Well, I mean, let me phrase that. I guess when did you decide you wanted to get into this field? And what was that moment?
Right. I'm teasing you, Gino. I think I get what you're asking me. So let me just rewind to this part of the story. I have been an advertiser since I first learned to spell my Bologna's first name. And for anyone who's old enough to remember this ad that was out in the late 70s for Oscar Mayer Bologna sandwiches, this little boy had a fishing rod and he was sitting on a pier. I ain't never been to a pier. I didn't know where he was, but in my mind, I was relating to him with his Bologna sandwich. And he sang this jingle. My Bologna has a first name. It's OSCAR, my Bologna, right? He's singing. It's a jingle. I don't know what jingles are, but I am captivated by this little boy with this little sandwich sitting on the pier with his fishing rod singing. And from that moment, when I was captured from that television spot, I was hooked. Get it hooked. He had a fishing hook. And I remember from that point when my friends were watching cartoons and they were watching Tom and Jerry or whatever was out, I was singing jingles. That's what I did. So as a kid growing up, last quick story, we played something called double dutch, which if you don't know what that is, it's 2 ropes, girls turn.
Oh, yeah.
And we jumped and I was good. So we would jump double dutch. And it wasn't just me on this one. My friends in the neighborhood, actually, we had another jingle that we were singing, but I didn't know it was advertising. This one was for McDonald's. And we would turn and we would jump and it would say, Big Mac, filet of fish, quarter pounder, French fry, icy Coke, thick shake sundae, and apple pie. Now, that is the entire McDonald's menu at the time. We were singing on repeat.
Still remember it.
And I still remember it. And it didn't hurt that I actually worked for McDonald's. That was one of my clients. That was actually my first advertising client.
That's a good one.
Isn't that something? So full circle. But we sang that as kids. So if you're following what I'm saying here, I was an advertiser before I knew what advertising was.
Absolutely. So then when you're like, when did you decide you want to study this? And this was like the next step. Like, I want to do this for real. I want to do this for a living.
Yeah, because, so I didn't know as I'm saying it, what it was. I was just seeing this stuff. And then when I went to college, interestingly, when I went to school, advertising wasn't necessarily a major. And if it was a major, it wasn't something that was called out like now. And you've worked in programs that really specifically focus on building a portfolio or, all that stuff didn't really exist. So I went away. My first university was a state school. And when I attended the school, I remember I didn't know what it was called. So I sort of studied an area called corporate communication / journalism because I write. And I wanted to be a copywriter. Didn't know copywriting was the title. So they stuck me in a journalism / corporate communication program, which was fine. It taught me fundamentals. I transferred from that institution. And when I got to Columbia, where I ended up staying, I was telling somebody the same thing I'm telling you in paraphrase form. And she said, you need to go into advertising. And I was like, what? And so luckily for me, that conversation I had with that individual led me the path of advertising. And as a result, I got formalized training at Columbia College Chicago that had a major in advertising. And that's how I was able to, by the grace of God, get plugged in. And once I got on that path, and once I took courses and started learning and being around other people like me who knew jingles and who we just were like our own community, it just flourished from there. I just found a way to really, do some things as an undergraduate, which really set me on the path to a successful career.
I love it. Anything that you remember out of the ordinary or outside of like your curriculars that you were involved with that were fundamental in like getting your first job?
Yes. So, and I tell my students this all the time. what you do in the classroom is maybe even less than half of what you need. And that's going to sound contradictory and counterintuitive. You just heard me say I'm a professor, and I'm not just saying this, y'all, because I'm retiring. I said this before. I'm not trying to subjugate what happens in the classroom or minimize that, because it's crucial. But the key, and I learned this from personal experience and also from just being in the industry, is what happens outside of that classroom that really, really counts. And so what I did as an undergraduate was I founded our Student Marketing Association on campus, and I became the president. Of course, I was the president. I founded it. So who else?
Of course.
So that's one thing you may want to do, start it, and then you become the leader automatically.
There you go. Yep.
But I did that. I served as an intern. I did several internships. Some were paid, some were not. And I know that students often say, well, I can't do that because, that's crazy. They're not going to use me. Trust me, you pay it forward, y'all. You do an internship maybe that they don't pay you for in terms of money, but there's so many other ways to get paid, right? I'll come back to that. Internships. I've shadowed professors who I thought were rock stars on my campus. If they taught a class and I thought, ooh, I want more, I would ask if they had 5 minutes of office time. And guess what? It turned into an hour. It turned into 2 hours. It turned into letters of recommendation. It just built relationships with them, right?
Right.
So I needed them. It came up. And I'll say this about that. One of my professors, he's the one who recommended me for my first job outside of school when I graduated. You see what I'm saying? So little things. So the things I did outside, if you're following me, were, now they have a technical term. It's called co-curricular, but whatever. It's called working your butt and working your connections and doing stuff that doesn't just focus only on your studies. And internships are key. I can't say that enough.
I never had straight A's in college. I made the dean's list, but never had straight A's. And I don't regret it for one bit, because the time I wasn't spending studying for all those tests, I was having fun with friends, of course, but mainly I was like doing extra things, like being involved in clubs and extracurriculars and doing the podcast when I was in school and making those connections. So I don't regret not getting straight A's at all. And in fact, if you're getting straight A's, like, that's fantastic, but you might be spending too much time studying and where you should be making those connections. If you can balance it all, that's great. I couldn't do it myself.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that. I mean, and when I met you, again, your personality shines through. You're a connector, and I saw that immediately, Gino. And here's what I tell students. I say, you know what? I don't want you to be so focused only on getting those A's or those grades. Because at the end of the day, are you able to talk? Are you able to communicate? Are you able to connect? Because that is what's going to help propel you forward. And I'm not saying that getting good grades is mutually exclusive from also being able to connect. Like you said, if you're able to balance both.
Yeah, of course.
But even if you aren't, if you're shy, because you don't have to be an extrovert, which I also think people think, well, I'm not an extrovert. No, it's not about that or being the loudest in the room. No. Like you said, you can do a podcast, you can write articles, you can connect with people on LinkedIn or social media. So there are other ways to do it. You just need to be able to get outside of that bubble of only focusing on one area and make yourself as well-rounded as possible.
Exactly. Love that. So you had a letter of recommendation, you said, from a professor, and those are super helpful. And sometimes they'll some professors will write you one, and they don't have much to write about.
Yeah.
Like I mean, when I was a sophomore, I would ask for them, and you have to make those connections and really have meaningful connections there in order to get a good letter, right? So
sure.
So that makes a lot of sense.
Well, Gino, I'll raise you one. I wrote the letters for my faculty members. I would write my own letter, and I would say, "Can you just sign this, or can you look this over?"
I've never heard that. That's smart. Why not?
I wrote it for them because, to your point, I either knew that they didn't have time, or maybe they didn't know me well enough, or they knew me, but they just maybe wouldn't capture all the essences of me that I wanted in that letter. And
there you go.
I got so good, it became like a machine. I started writing the letters for them. I started, giving it to something they couldn't really tell me no, because all I needed was it to be put on letterhead and you sign that baby. And so I got a lot of letters that way because I was proactive.
I've never, that's genius. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's incredible. So After that, then what was your first job? What was the interview process like? Where were you working? Give us the rundown there.
Well, I'm gonna give you a little sidebar note for a
Yep,
second, just so you all, because I'm being honest and real. I know I can do that with all of you. Thank you so much. I know you want me to be my authentic self on this
of
podcast.
course. Thank you so much.
So, all the wonderful things I'm sharing, Columbia was great. I told you about the letters of recommendation process, all that jazz. Well, what I didn't realize is that when I came out of school, and this was early 90s, a lot of the openness and open-mindedness, so to speak, that we've come so far with in many ways, although we still have some ways to go,
Hmm.
were still not overly prevalent at that time. And I'll break it down quite simply and say, me being a young Black girl, despite
Hmm.
my enthusiasm, despite my grade point average, despite I'd done 6 internships, when I
Wow.
graduated, they were not knocking over the doors or falling over to say to me, okay, come on in, we'll hire you. And that's despite me doing all of these things, right?
Right.
I didn't get the advertising jobs that I had so prayed for and
Hmm.
sent positive juju into the world for, quite honestly, because I think they didn't know what to do with me, or they thought, for whatever reasons, I wasn't a fit. And I got a little frustrated, especially when my friends, a lot of them were getting hired. And my friends we were a multicultural circle. So I wasn't hating on anybody, but I was a little confused because we were all like lined up neck and neck in terms of our
Right.
credentials. So I was a bit like confused, honestly, as to why some of them were getting hired and I wasn't. But because I don't give up,
Hmm.
because my late mother, Mary Catherine, instilled in me, when the doors close, the windows open, girl, just keep on pushing. The recommendation I got from my professor was actually for a public relations job. It wasn't for an advertising job.
Okay.
But at that point, listen, I was done with college. I didn't have any bills, thank goodness, because I'd paid for
Nice.
school, all scholarships. So I was debt free. I actually had enough to buy my first car,
Wow.
a hoopty, but it was a car.
Okay.
You know what a hoopty is, right?
No, I don't.
I know, because you paused when I said that. It's
Yeah,
it's
no, I don't know what
it's
it
like
is.
a raggedy car. It's like a car that goes, but it doesn't zoom, but it gets you there. It gets you there.
Oh, I like I had a beater
We call
car.
it a hoopty.
Okay.
It's like an older version of a car.
Love it.
Anyway, I graduated debt free with my hoopty, but when my career option came up, it was for public relations, and this is why I'm an integrated marketer. It wasn't by choice. It was because I had to go where the opportunities were. And when this position was made available and they said they'd pay me $25,000, I went, $25,000? That's wonderful, which don't y'all laugh at me. This is 1993. But I took the job. And even though it was bittersweet because it wasn't downtown, it was at Illinois Institute of Technology, which is on the south side of Chicago, where I also lived. So I was kind of bummed about that. I'm trying to get downtown, not work and live in the same place. But regardless, it was one of the best decisions that the universe aligned for me. Not only did I get the job, I worked there for 4 years. I was a media relations writer and editor, it was called. So I still was writing, even though it was in public relations and not advertising.
Hmm.
I met my husband there
Oh,
because
nice.
he was a student working on his architecture degree, and I met him at an event. And we've been married 25 years, so that's great.
Wow.
And I went to school there, totally paid for. So I got my MBA from Illinois Institute of Technology because I worked there full time. If you're following
Right, right. There you go.
my degree. So even though that wasn't what I had planned at all, you see how that worked out?
You made the most of it.
So I made the most of it, and it worked out to be, again, one of the best decisions, which led me to be able to teach later. So I just say that to say to anybody out there, no matter your planned path, which you should
Hmm.
have, don't get discouraged or upset or sad even if it doesn't go exactly as you originally thought it was, because you never know what little gems will be along the way if you just look down and pick them up.
Yes, that is incredible. So you were there for 4 years. You found your husband. You got an MBA,
Yes.
and I mean, way to make the most of it. I mean, because I don't know, I get stressed out sometimes, and I can't. Sometimes I feel like I can't see like what's ahead, and I
Right.
don't know. I get stressed out like everybody else, but I knowing
Mhm.
it'll all work out, everything happens for a reason.
Yes,
I
it
mean,
does. I mean, but it's all in your attitude. Like a student today in my class, I taught a presentation skills class this semester, and he gave a speech. And the title of his speech is "It Is What It Is." And when he started the speech, I cringed because I didn't like that phrase. I've heard "it is what it is," and it's often said sarcastically, like "it is what it is." But when he gave the speech, the way he presented it is he said, you know, you can fall out and stub your toe when you wake up in the morning, fall out of bed and stub your toe, or someone can cut you off in traffic. And he went through this litany of things that can happen. But he said, but if we just look at it and say, you know, basically, I can't control that, but I can control my reaction to it. And I
nice.
can control how I respond. And I know we've heard that before, but for some reason today that really resonated with me, especially. And I thought about it just based again on the story I'm sharing. I was not happy with that position, nor with that any of that stuff I said about that job. I was like not excited at all. But
Mhm.
when I got there, something in my mind clicked and it said, well, Shanita, you can sit here and be sad, or you can make the most of this experience. And by me just making that mental switch, a lot of great things ended up happening. And so that's what I always try to do. And it doesn't always work exactly right immediately. Sometimes you have to trick yourself. But once you do, I think more often than not, you'll be pleased with the results that can happen as you change your
Yeah.
mindset.
I mean, I love that. I need to remind myself that, and because I get bogged down, and that's just it's inspiring. So I appreciate that.
Mhm.
So what else? Then you broke into advertising, and what were some of the highlights of your career? Would you say, like, when you were before you broke into academia? What?
Yeah, so when I was at that first job I mentioned at IT, I'll rewind. You know, I said I did 6 internships. I won't go into all of that and why I did it, but they were great. And again, some were paid and some weren't paid. Well,
Mhm.
one of the non-paid internships that I did, ironically, I think it was also my first internship. I stayed in touch with that employer, which I
Nice.
encourage all of you all. If you have an internship or even a job, try to keep in touch with people. The community is big, but it's small. So
Mhm.
I'm at this job now that I got outside of school, the one I didn't want that turned out to be a blessing. I'm there about year 3. I'm wrapping up this MBA, and I get a phone call. And I answer the call, and it's from my employer, the employer I had at that first internship. And I said, hi. And he said, hi, Shanita, how are you? We have small talk. And he goes, you know what? Well, we have a position that's opened up, and we're wondering if you'd be interested in coming in and talking to us about it. And I thought about it and I said, okay, well, you know, tell me more.
Mhm.
And he told me it was an account supervisor position for McDonald's, the McDonald's brand. And if
Nice.
you know anything about the hierarchy of advertising, the entry level is associate or account executive, sometimes
Mhm.
an assistant account
Yeah.
executive, and then account supervisor. So the fact that he was calling me, if you all are following me, you know, 3 rungs up already, and even though this would be my first advertising gig, I
Wow.
was like, whoa. So of course I went in for the interview. Of
Of
course,
course.
I aced the interview. I get the job on the spot. I'm better at negotiating a little bit now. So I made a big
Mhm.
salary leap. So I said bye-bye to IIT, went to back to the agency, this time as an account supervisor. Another great move. I was on North Michigan Avenue. The agency is where the Nordstrom building is now at 500 North Michigan. So I was like in heaven because it's exactly where I wanted
Wait,
to be.
what was the agency?
It was called RJ Dale Advertising.
And
So a
it
small
was in the
boutique.
Nordstrom?
It was in the Nordstrom, where the
I'm right
Nordstrom
across it right now at Havas and on
building.
Grand.
Oh yes. So I was right. So you know what I'm talking about. That is the
Yeah.
best area to be
It's
in.
nice. It's
It's
nice.
restaurants, the lake. It's just a great, right? Everything in that spot I loved it. So I was on the 22nd floor. I had a view, as I mentioned, of Michigan Avenue on one side, the lake on the other, or the river, whatever it is. And I was just thrilled. And McDonald's is a wonderful brand to work for. So I got a
Mhm.
multiple education. Now I had the MBA and I had my undergraduate degree. But when I went to this advertising agency for my first foray into the field that I've
Sure.
been so excited about as a kid, there was a whole nother learning
Oh,
opportunity
yeah.
for me. It was baptism by fire, but I was entrenched, and that was another
Yeah.
4 years. I did that for additional 4 years at that small boutique agency. And the last point I'll make about that, it was smaller, in that I got to put my hands in multiple pots because the president was hands-on. We were full service, but because there were only about 10 to 12 employees total, I was able to run to the creative area. I was able to run, so I got a whole indoctrination on all aspects of pulling campaigns together and all that jazz in that 4 years time. And I was really thankful for that. It was a great experience.
I love it. Yeah, the smaller agencies where we often talk about the difference between like large versus small agencies. And the small ones, we know that you can wear a lot of hats. You understand all the process, and I think. And you were account. You were always account.
Yeah, I was always account, and you tell me how much you want me to share, Gino, because I'm mindful that we're condensing it in a short window of time. But I just want to add this. So the agency was small. It was full service, as I mentioned. Robert Dale was the president, and the agency was named after him, R.J. Dale. He's since passed away, but he was a great mentor to me and a really wonderful resource. And he remembered me as an intern, and that's what I'm saying. Those relationships are crucial. When I was there with him for the 4 years, again, I pretty much doubled my salary from what I was making at my first job.
Nice.
Then I got a little anxious because even though I had my hand in multiple pots, the pots were smaller pots. We didn't have a huge budget. We had McDonald's, but we didn't have the big McDonald's budgets. The Leo Burnett's had that at the time, Golden Harris's. And I was getting a little jealous, to be honest, because I had these grandiose ideas and I felt that I couldn't bring them to life because we didn't have the resources. And so around that time is when I went and decided to go to a different agency, still for McDonald's, but this one was called Burrell Communications Group. And Burrell is multinational, is global. Tom Burrell was a hero of mine, still is, for paving the way, particularly for Blacks in advertising. And so they started courting me and I started responding, and I made an offer to my president, Mr. Dale, and said, well, Mr. Dale, Burrell was going to double my salary essentially. Can you match it? And he said, absolutely not. And I was a little surprised and hurt by that, but I said, okay, well, guess I got to go. So I left RJ Dale, but it was on good note. It was love.
Yeah.
Went to Burrell, and Burrell had, as I mentioned, a huge budget. Still McDonald's, but it was a different level of me. Again, if you're following my thread here of ascension, because now I was on the national level, which was a whole nother animal. Because at RJ Dale, I didn't say this, I was in charge of local franchise owners doing the advertising for that group. And when I went to Burrell, it was the national team, and that was, TV, and it was just huge. And I can't just get Monopoly game, and oh gosh, it was just a whole other level. So I was thrilled to be doing that and going out to Oak Brook and going to Hamburg University on a regular basis. So all of that was just very exciting and thrilling for me.
Right. When did you decide to go into academia?
So I'm at Burrell. I'm kicking butt. Everything's great. At this time, my husband and I have a young son. I had my oldest son, I was towing him around to all the McDonald's events and doing all the stuff as much as I could with him. He did not like Ronald McDonald, by the way. He scared my baby. He used to like run. It was hilarious. But, he can be intimidating. Those red shoes, I think, scared my baby. Those big red
scared
shoes.
Me too.
I know, right? With that white makeup and red lips. Anyway.
I get it.
So I was a young mother, and I was trying to balance my family, my growing family, and my career.
I can't imagine having.
Yeah,
I can't even imagine getting a girlfriend right now.
It's a lot. You got to pace yourself. Pace yourself.
I know.
So my husband was starting his company around the same time as well. So there was an added iron in the fire. Then I discovered I was having another baby. So there were a lot of things happening, and I just had to take a step back. And I don't mean to make this sound as though it was a, how do I say this? It was a decision that was consciously made. I wasn't like sad or wasn't saying to myself, well, girl, you can't do it all. I just made a decision that for me personally, the rigor and the attention that I needed to give at that time to my agency work and my family at the time, because they were so young, I was trying to juggle it, and it was starting to stress me out, quite honestly.
Yeah.
But because I loved the field and love what we do, I had to make a decision as to how can I keep my foot in our field, but still have my family and balance that. So what initially began as only a foray, right? I said to my people at Burrell and others, I said, well, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to teach. I'm going to come back. Everybody was cool. I was really set on that.
You didn't come back.
I didn't come back. I went into teaching like I did that first gig thinking, okay, and no, not quite, because I didn't want the first gig, but teaching was supposed to just be temporary. I was part-time, by the way. I was an adjunct, as they are called. I was teaching at night, one class a week. Then it became 2. You following me? Then it became 3. And then my then chair of the department came to me and said, well, Shanita, you should become what's called a tenure track faculty member. We'd like to invite you to become tenure track. And Gino, all I heard was track. And I was like, I don't run. I don't want nothing to do with that. Unless it's a sale at Macy's, I do not run.
Love it.
So they convinced me after many, believe it or not, I was turning them down. I was like, no, because I didn't know. And she said, well, Shanita, you're essentially doing it. You're essentially teaching what a full-time person does with these 3 classes. At this point, I was in 3. And I was like, and then she said, and you get this and this and this. And I was like, oh, tell me more. So I signed on board to become a tenured track faculty member in 2001. This is after I'd been teaching now about 2 to 3 years part-time. Sure. My kids were a little older, but even though they were older, like I said, I had gotten bitten by this bug, and I just, and it took off from there. And I have loved every minute of it since. So that's the way that happened. And then what was great about it is all my friends in the industry and all the connections I'd made and all the clients for McDonald's. And I did
they're speaking.
They're coming in, guest speaking.
Getting jobs.
They're getting jobs. My students, we're taking field trips. We're going to Havas. We're going to all these places. And my students are like, wow, they love it because I'm like hooking them up. So
right.
Cool.
You become that every school, every school has a couple of professors that really connect.
Connections.
We all know who they are, and they're always getting bombarded people are trying to make connections with them, and for good reason. I mean, and you're definitely, you were one of them for the longest time.
Well, yeah. So I enjoyed that. And also what was really crucial for me as a professor, and again, I had a great undergraduate experience at Columbia. It really opened my eyes into the validation that I needed to know that as a Black young girl, it didn't matter. They saw my WHO, and not my HUE, my hue. Columbia was they were awesome on that. I really felt seen, right? So when I graduated, though, I knew there were a lot more students coming through the pipeline, that may, for whatever reasons, not necessarily have that experience for a variety of reasons, and not so much in their undergraduate collegiate experience, but trying to break into that industry. As I mentioned to you, despite all that love I got, when I went out and tried to break the door down, they were like, So I wanted to help connect the dots, as I call it, from classroom to career or classroom to boardroom. So that's what I'm still doing, which is why the CAF Career Day and AMA Boot Camp, I'm really vested in that. So that's been my main focus, and why teaching and mentoring is so enjoyable to me, to make those connections for my students.
I love that. And when you have a passion and the single-minded focus like you do, it makes it easy to get up and do it every day for so long. And having that passion is so important. I really recommend everybody figuring out whether it's on the side or with your career, what is that thing that you're really passionate about, and then just try to do that every day. And
absolutely,
and that's why I do with this podcast. I haven't missed a week in 113 weeks.
Wow, that is commendable. And you've got everything else going on. So it's not easy. And let me just say, people with my podcast and you having a podcast, I think people just think you wake up and do the podcast. I'm like, no, you have to research things and set it up and write it. And
well, yours is really, really good. This one's not as polished, but yours is fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, and maybe one last question I guess I have here is what are some of the biggest lessons that you've tried to teach over the years that you can tell us?
Well, I think at the end of the day, being who you are authentically is important, and not thinking that you have to change or be different in order to be accepted. The wonderful thing about our industry, about advertising, is that it's for those, and I want to be careful how I say this, but I'll call them misfits. Misfits in that we don't fit into the boxes of the perfected, whatever you want to, paradigms, right? For whatever reasons. Whether it's because we are the ones who like to color outside the lines, or we may be the ones who everybody's wearing blue and we decide to wear yellow, or, everyone's turning right and we go, well, can we just dance around the circle first? So when you're that kind of person, sometimes you may be in situations where you feel alienated or ridiculed even, or you may just feel like, why am I different? If you're ever questioning yourself. Well, that's what I want you to embrace. It's that very thing that makes you different, that will allow you to soar in advertising. Because one of the beautiful things about the industry, and I think why I've loved it so long, is it's that one little piece of hair that pokes up, right? That one little needle in the haystack that breaks through, as we call it, breaks through the clutter, as we say. You want to be the one that breaks through. We call them disruptors. And we keep seeing time and time again, but it keeps surprising us, the brands, the things in industry, like from the Netflixes of the world to the Ubers of the world, to right, that come through and they take something that we've always taken for granted and they just switch it. And if you are that person in your spirit, then you are going to be wonderfully placed in our field. So I just want people to give themselves permission to be who they are, and to know that even if it seems as a little weird or off, there's a place for you. There's a place for you.
Yeah, you have to embrace it.
Yep.
People succeed when they really embrace it. I respect those people when they really just know who they are and they own it and they love it. It's just it radiates too.
Yep, it does.
How can people connect with you, reach out to you, ask you any questions, learn more? What's the best way to do so?
Well, I love questions, and I love you reaching out, even if you just want to tell me like the best place to go get ice cream. Okay, sidebar. So it's really nice, as I started the podcast with, and I love like ice cream and sundaes and stuff. So you can talk to me offline and tell me the best places to go for those kinds of things.
Okay.
You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me. Again, I mentioned my podcast, which is on, Apple, Google Play, Amazon, all that jazz, called Marketing Insights. It's from McGraw-Hill. You can reach me on Instagram. You can reach me on Twitter. So Shanita Speaks. So just find me on social media, and I'm happy to connect and answer any questions or talk to anybody.
Amazing. I'm not surprised, and I appreciate you taking the time. That's all I got, Shanita. This has been fantastic, and congratulations on your teaching career. I'm jealous. I never got to sit in the classroom, but I'm glad I met you at the tail end.
I am as well. And I'll plug you in somewhere, Gino, as we'll connect on something, even if it's not in that classroom. We'll find a platform.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this entire episode of the Breaking and Entering Advertising podcast. If you liked what you listened to today and you like the guests, please go ahead and connect with them. Easiest way to find their contact information and to see those resources that they recommended for you is to go to our Instagram at Breaking and Entering Pod, all one word. And for some quick thank yous for making this show possible, the first one is the company Shure. It's a microphone company, Shure. They provided the microphone that you're listening to right now. It's the MV7. It's great for podcasting and other forms of content. So if you're interested in starting a podcast or you're looking for equipment, talk with me. I really recommend the Shure MV7. Happy to give you details on that. And I would also like to thank my two guys, Mikey Malarkey, who's our audio engineer, does it every week. He's the Let's Kick It in the beginning. Thank you to Mikey. And of course, thank you to Buchan Zhang, our creative director. Buchan is responsible, amazing visuals on our Instagram. So thank you, Buchan. And thank you all once more for listening. We will see you next week.